All right, we'll call the meeting to order for Wednesday, March 24th for the BZA Board of Zoning Appeals. If you will all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight's meeting will be a little bit different. Tonight we will be electing our officers, and so we'll go in reverse order. We're going to bring forth the election of the secretary. Do we have a nomination for the office of secretary?
I'll nominate Mr. Hill for secretary.
Okay, we have a nomination. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second has been made. Any discussion? I see none. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Mr. Roberto.
Yes.
Mr. Reininger.
Aye.
Mr. Shupp.
Aye.
Mr. Bartold.
Yes.
Okay, so that carries forward. The next position would be for the vice chair. Do we have a nomination for vice chair? I'll make a nomination of Tom Reininger.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Do we have a discussion? I see none. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Mr. Roberto.
Yes.
Mr. Reininger.
Aye.
Mr. Shupp.
Aye.
Mr. Bartold.
Yes.
And the last would be for the chair position. Do we have a nomination?
I'll nominate Mr. Roberto to be chair for this next year.
Okay, it's a nomination. We have a second.
Second.
Second has been made. Any discussion? I see none. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Mr. Roberto.
Yes.
Mr. Reininger.
Aye.
Mr. Shupp.
Aye.
Mr. Bartold.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you for that, and thank you for our indulgence on that. The next part of that would be the explanation of procedures. And I didn't get a procedure statement, but I'll wing it tonight. The way it's going to be is we're going to bring forth the staff is going to make a presentation, and then we'll have, you got something here, perfect. And then once they've made the presentation, we'll have the applicant come forward. Applicant will make their presentation and discuss, about the project. Then we'll close the public portion. Anybody that's for or against will come up and discuss. And then we'll close the public portion. And then the board may ask questions of, the applicant or anyone else that had spoke in the meeting this evening. So before we go to that effect, we would like for anyone that's going to speak tonight, if you please stand and raise your right hand. Anyone that's going to speak? Okay. You swear and affirm you will tell the truth and nothing but the truth before the Board of Zoning Appeals? Say, I do. Okay. Notice that there are two speakers tonight. Do you have those on the sign-in sheet? Two speakers. Thank you. Okay, and so then we will do a roll call vote as who is present tonight for the meeting. If you do a roll call vote.
Yes, certainly. Mr. Hill.
Present.
Mr. Roberto.
Here.
Mr. Reininger.
Here.
Mr. Shupp.
Here.
Mr. Bartold.
Here.
Okay, I notice everyone is present this evening. So we will go into, we don't need to swear anyone in, we've done that, so we're going to do the hearing appeals. So our first case and the only case will be BZA 2021-01. This is a request for variance of landscape buffer and stacking requirements. The property location is 3680 and 3798 Springdale Road. The applicant and owners, David Metz on behalf of the Grand Development and Princeton Vent. Does staff have a presentation?
We do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. My name's Michael Iona. I'll be presenting for the Department of Planning and Zoning. As stated, the application is for two variance requests at a property located along Springdale Road. You can see the site in question here. It's located in an area on Springdale Road that is very close to the Colerain Avenue corridor. The site itself is currently occupied by vacant land. However, the area surrounding the site, again, is currently occupied by a built-up commercial area with a higher density, intensity commercial uses. You can see immediately adjacent to the site is where the new Cincinnatus development is going to be constructed. It's also located adjacent to Kroger's. The peripheral area to the north is currently occupied by Stone Creek Town Center. Immediately to the south of the site, across Springdale Road, is Northgate Mall. And then there is also a residential subdivision. It's a moderate density residential subdivision that's located along a portion of the area to the north of the site. And then immediately west of the site in question is Goodyear Tire. Here you can see a close-up of the site in question. Again, Northgate Mall is located to the south. To the north of the site are those detached single-family residential homes. To the east is the Cincinnati site, which is currently being developed. And then to the west is the Goodyear site. The site in question itself is zoned B2. The B2 zoning district currently permits a variety of commercial retail service uses located located on a moderate lot size. The area to the north of the site is currently zoned R4. That's a moderate density residential zoning district that permits detached single-family dwellings. And then the area to the south is currently zoned planned development business. And that's a planned development a business district, and it permits, again, a variety of commercial retail service uses. So there is some history on the site in question. In 2015, there was an old residential estate home located on the site. It was rezoned to B2. And then in 2016, a proposal was brought to the board for consideration. It was for a Freddy's Steak Burger. The board voted to deny multiple variance requests related to setback and landscape buffer. I believe there were 5 variance requests. And reading through the minutes, it was determined that the intensity and density of that use, along with the location of the drive-through being very close to the rear property line, closer than what was submitted tonight, due to all of those variance requests, it wasn't appropriate for approval. There was a variance request for the adjacent site, the Goodyear site, and there was a landscape buffer request, similar to what was requested, is being requested this evening. And that was denied. And then there was a variance approved for the Cincinnati site, and that is the site immediately to the east of the site in question. And that is the same request that's before you this evening. They propose to be constructed at 25 feet where 40 feet is required, and that was approved. And reading through the minutes, I believe that Goodyear variance was denied due to the type of use and issues regarding potential noise from the Goodyear. In 2019, the applicant submitted for a 2-tenant commercial space on the site in question, and that was approved by the board. That request did not have a drive-through window. It did have a request for the rear landscape buffer, and it's the same request that's before the board tonight. The request was reduce the landscape buffer from 40 feet to 25 feet. The board did approve that variance along with a parking variance. The parking variance isn't before the board this evening due to the change in land uses that will be on the site. So the current proposal meets the parking requirements, so that variance isn't necessary this evening. And then in 2021, Cincinnati began construction on their 2-tenant space that's located immediately adjacent to the site to the east. And again, they would have the same rear yard setback as what's being proposed this evening. And then the current application this evening. So the applicant is coming back with a new plan, and they will have the same variance request that they have in 2019. And then they will also have a variance request from the stacking requirements for parking. You're required to have 8 parking spaces for a restaurant, and the applicant is showing 5 parking spaces. And then they're coming back for that same variance from the landscape requirement. Due to the change in plans, let me back up. They can continue to have that 2019 plan done into perpetuity. So whether they build it today, tomorrow, or in a year, as long as they build that plan. There were enough changes, and due to the history on the site in question where there was a previous variance denied for the Freddies, albeit grouped in with 5 other variance requests, due to those changes, staff felt that it warranted a new application, and that's what you have before you this evening. So again, that 2019, that's approved, nothing here changes that. The 2021 application, that's tonight, has that same landscape variance request in addition to that stacking requirement request. And I'll go over that here shortly. So moving forward, here you can see the previous approval. Again, it was a 2-tenant space plan. You can see that the applicant has provided a significant amount of landscape on the site in question, above and beyond, in some cases, what's required. All of the plantings along the rear on the approved plan of 2019 is what you have here. All of the landscaping and plantings along the rear were far in excess of what was required. I believe there was a 3-foot berm. On top of that, they were going to have 10 to 12-foot evergreens, trees, and then they also had a fence along the rear portion of the site. And again, I'm just showing this slide for reference so you can see what was approved. And then moving forward, the development plan this evening shows, again, a very similar building footprint. It's fleshed out a little bit more. There's this outdoor kind of dining area, small outdoor dining area in association with the restaurant, and that was pretty much the same as what was before. And then the big change here is that this tenant, the second tenant space, was broken down into 3 spaces, which is permitted. But then here you have that drive-through with the stacking for 5 vehicles. And that's really the big change in this site plan, is that stacking requirement. And then again, the drive-through. The applicant proposes to keep essentially the same landscaping plan and development plan as was previously approved in 2019. Again, you're going to have that 3 feet land or earth berm, and then on top of that, you'll have those 10 to 12 foot at planting evergreen trees, and then along with the bushes. And I think the total number is 19 evergreens located along the rear lot line, planted on a 3-foot earthen perm, and then there is a fence located on the property line, in addition to some of these additional like ornamental and flowering trees, and then 40 bushes located along that rear property line. And then again, there's landscaping shown throughout the site in question. And here, if you kind of see where the big change is, this is essentially what the applicant's proposing. So you have the previous plan, and then here is the new plan, the amended plan, where they show you the 2 additional spaces, and then they're accommodating a drive-through that would be in association with a smoothie store. So this tenant space will be a smoothie store, and then this will be their drive-through for accessory sales. So I'll just kind of show that one more time. You can see the old plan, and then this is roughly what the new plan would look like. Oh, excuse me. Okay. And then just kind of like diving back, this is something that was submitted in 2019, and it's not going to change. It's still relevant. This is a cross section of what the view shed would look like from the adjacent residential properties, because that is, that's where the variance is being requested, and those are the impacted property owners. And this gives you kind of a view shed of what it would look like with the additional landscaping that is being provided by the applicant. And again, here you can see that due to that 3 feet landscape berm, there's that vinyl fence. I think some of the property owners have an existing fence, and then there are those 10 to 12 feet at planting evergreen trees, and here you can see the view shed. It goes over the building. If those trees were planted at the 6 feet height that they're required, that view shed might be something, at a much lower trajectory than that. even if the 40-foot buffer was provided and the minimum requirements of the ordinance were met. The applicant has also provided a lighting plan. That lighting plan does indicate that there will be 0-foot candles at the lot lines, which is consistent with the zoning resolution and township resolutions. And then additionally, the applicant has also indicated that they intend to provide that ornamental lighting that currently exists along Springdale Road. So they're going to kind of continue that character and form moving down the development, which is great. Again, here you can see kind of a close-up of the smoothie store. It's a tropical smoothie cafe. They're going to operate out of about an 1,800 square foot end cap tenant space. Their typical hours of operation are 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., so not late evening hours. And then, the applicant has also provided a breakdown of the typical hours of operation. And of those, the 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. hours are typically their heaviest hours. Again, here you can see the stacking that they provided. The requirement, again, is 8 vehicles, and they're showing stacking for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then kind of a 6th there. So that's it for the drive-through. And then you can see some of the interior layout of the tenant space. And then the drive-through window is located approximately here. Here's a elevation, a sample elevation of what the proposal would look like as built. Again, this is a sample elevation, but this is indicative of the type of materials and architecture that the applicant proposes to use. And in order to accomplish the project, the applicant is requesting 2 variances this evening. And the first is a variance from the minimum landscape buffer requirements. The ordinance requires 40 feet. The applicant is showing 25 feet, and that is a variance request of 15 feet. And the second request is a variance from the minimum stacking requirements for drive-through. The zoning resolution identifies the proposed use as a restaurant, and restaurants are required to have 8 parking spaces, or stacking spaces. The applicant is providing 5 spaces, and that is a resulting variance request of 3 spaces. The statutes for review and determination for variances are as follows. The board shouldn't authorize a variance that would allow for a use that would be prohibited in the zoning district in which the property is located. The board should not or may authorize a variance when that variance will not be adverse to the public health, safety, or welfare. Additionally, the board may impose conditions they see fit on any project in order to ensure that it's consistent and compatible with the surrounding areas and to reduce the impact of the project. The board should not authorize a variance that would be contrary to the public interest. And then no variance should be considered or granted by the board that would allow for a change of use in a parcel, so no use variances. So based on that, staff is recommending approval subject of the project, both variances, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, that the proposed drive-through be operated in conjunction with Tropical Smoothie Cafe only, and that's the proposed tenant in the end cap, and that any subsequent change of use in that tenant space making use of the drive-through shall require a resubmission for the variance from the drive-through stacking requirements on the site. A resubmission shall not be required in the event that said drive-through is removed for any change of use in that tenant space. Number 2, that the proposed drive-through shall not be in operation later than 9 p.m. on weekdays or 10 p.m. on weekends, and that all landscaping and buffering should be consistent with the plans identified within the submitted development plan. And the basis for that is that staff finds that the approval of the variance is not going to authorize the granting of a variance that would allow for a use that's not permitted in the B2 use. The tropical smoothie is a commercial retail service use. Commercial retail service uses are permitted in a B2 district. Number 2, the granting of the variance to the landscape buffer is going to allow the development to be constructed at setbacks that are similar to adjacent properties, so the Cincinnati site. Number three, the granting of the variance is not going to adversely impact the public health, safety, or welfare. In fact, the plantings along the rear property line are far in excess of the planting requirements. For example, the evergreen plantings are going to be 10 to 12 feet at installation where 6 feet is required. That's almost 2 times the planting height. The evergreen plantings will be planted on a 3 feet tall earthen berm. An earthen berm isn't even required. So that bumps the height to about 13 to 15 feet at installation. Even if that 40 feet were provided and the applicant met the 6 feet threshold, it would take a significant amount of time for those plantings to grow to a height that is being provided at built environment. And then the applicant's also providing a fence where only a fence or berm is required. And then additionally, the applicant's installing a significant amount of landscaping throughout the site, but also along the rear landscaping buffer. Number four, granting the variance is consistent with previous approvals for the board on this site as well as the site adjacent to the property. And then number five, as it pertains to the drive-through stacking, staff finds that it's not going to be detrimental to the surrounding areas. It's not going to adversely impact the public health, safety, or welfare. The stacking requirements within the zoning resolution are in fact written for higher volume restaurants like McDonald's and Taco Bell or Burger King or Freddy's Steak Burgers, all of which really have high volume throughout the day and particularly in the evening. And this is a smoothie store, and from the information submitted, it appears that those, while they do volume through the drive-through, it's more of an accessory function than something like a Mickey D's or a Taco Bell that really does a high volume throughout the day and in some cases throughout the evening. So, and then additionally, that condition on the drive-through will ensure that all drive-through sales or any vehicular traffic occurring in conjunction with that drive-through will end at an appropriate time in the evening. And that's all I have for the staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for staff?
Well, I've got one.
Is your mic on?
Yes. So what triggered having to do variance number one over again? Is it the fact that the footprint changed of the building?
The overall project changed.
Okay. So that alone means we have to re-look at the...
We would look at,
variance.
yeah,
Okay.
we would look at things differently, yes.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Anyone else?
I do have a question. As it relates to the previous plan, has there been a zoning certificate issued for them to start construction on that plan?
There has not.
Is there a sunset clause that says something like you have to obtain a zoning certificate within 1 year or your variance is null and void?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
There's not.
Just wanted to clarify that. Can you bring up the new plan? I just want to see the stacking again.
You want the
Their overall site?
Yeah.
the overall
Yes.
site?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
certainly.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Chair. Mr. Aaron, a question on, is there any concern with parking other than the stacking? As some restaurants or eating establishments have a requirement for parking spaces. They've met all that.
They've met the requirements for the parking, yes.
Is there any concern about signage?
They will provide signage in accordance with the zoning resolution.
Great. And then we have switched from 2 tenant spaces to 3 tenant spaces. Does that have any impact on the parking other than this site?
So the last time in 2019, they did get that very small variance. It was because we have a plus or minus on the minimum parking requirements. So you can do like 10% above what's required, 10% below. And they had a couple extra spaces, and we were going to try to if you're looking at the slide, we allowed that variance because we wanted to try to see if they could connect to the Cincinnati site to allow for greater connectivity between those uses. That ended up not being feasible, but as they presented the application tonight, due to the changes in the use types with the restaurant, the parking requirements actually just flush out perfect, so.
Okay, thank you.
Do they have in the landscaping, are they doing the irrigation or of the shrubbery and all that? Is that gonna be irrigated?
You know, that might be something that the applicant could answer.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was in
I'm
the
not
plans that you had.
completely-
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Any other for the staff?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, to your point, though, you know, are you referring to like the ability of the growth to stay healthy?
Sure.
Yeah, so if the growth does go, if it does die or whatever, it's required to be replaced.
Right.
So if any of these trees should die or not make it, then they are required, that buffer is in place. It's required to be replaced in accordance with everything that would be approved here. So if they plant those trees, half of them die in a year or two, they forget to water them or whatever, they would have to be replaced throughout the duration of the development.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, I don't know if this would be a question for you, Mike, or the applicant, but in regards to the plastic fencing in the back, is that a privacy fence or is it a ventilated type fence?
I believe it to be a vinyl fence, but I think the applicant might be able to clarify maybe a little bit more about that.
It's more of a privacy fence, I
More of a
believe.
privacy fence is what yeah.
Okay, that was it.
So I think it's a vinyl privacy fence, 6 feet, and then in front of that's that berm, and I think when we had talked about it, the berm was intended to like cut any lighting from like a vehicle that would be driving back there. So the berm, and then you have the fence, and then obviously you have the wall of evergreens, so.
And to give you a little clarity too, what happened in 2016, I think it was, they wanted 3 actual buildings and they wanted to subdivide it so it was less than an acre. So there was the biggest resistance that we had as a board is that they were trying to get a whole lot into a very small space. So we were resistant to that. And then Goodyear, the reason why it was denied is because they went and blacktopped it without asking for permission.
Oh, okay.
And then they came before the board and was looking for forgiveness, and we were not in a forgiving mood. So,
Understandable.
so that's what happened on those two. So, any other questions for staff? All right, I see none. So we're gonna call up the applicant and you can go and give your presentation. And when you come up there, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name's Dave Metz. I live at 6890 Jennifer Lynn Drive, right off Rival Road, Green Township. We were in here in December of 2019 to make this presentation on, as was shown, the previously shown building. And as we all know, in first quarter of 2020, we were hit with COVID. Virtually everybody was shut down, and the project was put on hold. What became evident during COVID was the prevalence, the need for drive-through or pickup windows. A lot of restaurants going forward are actually even considering locations that only have pickup and delivery and a very modest inside. So the so-called drive-through pickup window has become kind of a staple going forward in the retail restaurant industry. I'm a commercial realtor, and you can't hardly place a restaurant anywhere if they don't have the ability to have a drive-through. Even the pizza operations want a pickup window. So it's become very much in trend with today with COVID and so forth. For all intents and purposes, just kind of a review. In our minds, and I understand the presentation of the two, we presented a 2-unit building back in 19. It really wasn't intended to be a 2-unit. We showed 1 unit being a restaurant and the rest being retail. It was our intent all along that it would be multi-tenant. That could be two, three, or four. I don't think you get five in there because the depth isn't enough to get 4 or 5 users in there. We are in conversation with Tropical Smoothie. They've told us all along that if we could get a drive-through approved, that they would be very interested in signing the lease. As you saw, they went so far as to take their engineering and do the proposed drive-through. The depth of the lot basically requires that piece of the building you see kind of cut off, and curve around to make it all work. There's no intention, as was previously said, there's no intention to change the landscaping buffer in the rear. All that's will stay in place, and all the lighting, et cetera. The question was asked about landscape irrigation, and I think it's a very good point. And in my own mind, it should be irrigated because of the amount of vegetation that's back there. You're losing 4 or 5 of those, and any kind of frequency, you might as well have the irrigation.
You paid for the irrigation.
And so I believe the irrigation should be in place, and especially that rear, the front might be a little bit different. In that rear buffer area, I believe that the irrigation system should be made in place. In terms of the exact size, the original building was 8,554 square feet. This is, what you're looking at there is, I believe, 8,690. And final architecture has not been done, has been held on.
Is your microphone on, sir?
There's a button on the bottom.
Side here.
Hello, can you hear?
Thank you.
The exact square footage could change 100 or so square feet in either direction because the final architecture has not been done. It was put on hold to determine whether the drive-through would be approved. Because as you saw before, the design, the dimension of the building and so forth changes without the with or without the drive-through. But it would be approximately within 100 or 200 square feet. I think this is a little bit more than 100, or this is a little over 150 square feet more than the other. And this isn't a final design. This was just this was put together to to show the drive-through and stacking and so forth. We think that the drive-through component, whether it's Tropical Smoothie or somebody else, is very important. That could be a bank. It could be. We actually had Cincinnati talking to us one time because they had an offer on their property, and they want to come down here. So the point is the drive-through component is pretty critical to this, and a lot of developments today, not just this one, but most of them. But we think it could be a very nice project, a very nice, well located. It's got the proper zoning, as was originally said. We would only include the approved uses. It's not our intention to come in here and ask for anything that wouldn't fall into that type of zoning.
Okay.
That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Anyone else speaking in favor of the application? I see none. Anyone speaking in opposition? Please come forward.
I'm not really in opposition, I just have questions.
Okay, please come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Lisa Shepherd, and I'm at 3715 Susanna Drive, directly behind the smoothie operation that's coming. And if, I noticed on those pictures, there are some lower bushes that have been talked about. And would you mind going to the next slide that shows the view, please? That is inaccurate, and I don't think anybody really realizes it unless you're standing on my porch. My land goes down like this. So from my porch or my dining room, I can see the road, I can see the people's tires on the road because I'm up higher. And that's my concern, is somebody's gonna be sitting there, even with the 6-foot wall. I have a 6-foot privacy fence and I can see completely over it. So I'm worried about people sitting there in the drive-through looking at me having my dinner or on my back porch or going to my swimming pool. And I'm wondering if there's a way that there could be a 3-foot berm under the 6-foot fence or increase the height of the fence so that I'm not sitting at my table watching somebody watch me eat.
Okay.
Thanks for your consideration.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Anyone else speaking in opposition? I see none. Can we have a motion to close the public portion?
So move.
Motion been made, seconded.
Second.
Any discussion? I see none. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Roberto?
Go for me with, you'll go with me
Oh,
last.
I'm sorry,
Yes, please.
excuse me. Mr. Reininger?
Aye.
Mr. Shup?
Aye.
Mr. Bartle?
Yes.
Mr. Roberto?
Yes. Thank you. All right, so do we have questions from the board? We'll start with Mr. Bartle.
Well, considering what we just heard about, the property's not flat, if the berm were shifted, well, number one, the privacy fence obviously has to be on the applicant's property, correct?
That is correct.
And the berm also.
That is correct.
If putting the berm to the north to get it under the fence appeased property owners, but meant the berm would have to be somewhat on their property, is that allowed if they agree to it?
I think
It's probably a
potentially
legal
something
question.
could be worked out.
Yeah,
You'd have to get permission from the property owners, but yeah.
yeah. I mean, if
At
they're,
the end of the day, there would have to be some kind of agreement that, if the,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, maybe
But then
the
it would
berm-
be there'd probably be some type of maintenance agreement for somebody, if they put the berm on that side, this property owner on the residential side or a subsequent property owner wants to like regrade or do something, does that, impact the
Right.
berm, and then what happens to that portion of it? And then you also have to consider that this isn't the only property.
Right.
So there's other properties. If that fence gets put on the berm and then, you move the trees back, all of a sudden you're at the 40 feet. And then the applicant could put the 6-foot tree, and then no berm, which would be another option.
Yeah.
Which would be a denied variance. But, so it would be very difficult, I think, to do that berm all the way down and get agreement with all those property owners. Now, if that was a scenario, then,
You're affecting 4 properties.
that's really difficult to do.
Yeah.
And then what do we have behind Goodyear? It's straight flat with a fence, isn't it?
It is.
And I used to live on Susanna, so I know that everything kind of swales down, and it was kind of like a natural drainage that goes all the way to I live behind where they're currently developing the Cincinnatius, so all the water came to me.
So you can see right here where the Goodyear is, and they did the minimum required number of trees.
Right.
And, they met the minimum requirements at 6 feet. And if you drive by, you can see, their approximate height. And
That property is much more flat.
it is.
Mine and the one on
Yeah.
the other side.
Yeah, so I don't know
Yes.
that we're going to be able to accommodate that without talking to all the owners of the properties to get that change, and we're not going to be able to make that change today.
Or the berm gets higher, if allowed to be higher,
That'd be the other option.
yeah. But I don't know how high it can get and maintain your slopes of the berm.
That was one of the, so when we brought this in 19, Dave was kind enough and his group sat down and that's what we came up with was, well, let's get the berm. It should cut off at as many of the lights. And then, let's try to get this landscape wall, evergreen landscape wall. And then every once in a while in the landscape, well, there's like some ornamental trees and all the bushes. And, you know, that's something that we came up with. The minimum requirements, again, are, if you're looking at this, you can, you know, if they just provide this much more buffer, which is at 15 feet, which, you know, a parking space is about 9 by 18. So, you know, if you're looking about where this rear line is, you know, they could go to no berm, 1 6-foot fence, and then significantly less trees at 6 feet tall. But that would also push the development forward out into Springdale Road. So in order to kind of get a better site plan that meshed well with the surrounding areas, you know, but also provided significantly greater landscape to the adjacent property owners, that would last into perpetuity. Again, you're getting an earthen berm that has to be maintained, and then you have those trees that are planted at that 12 feet height, or 10 to 12 feet height. You're getting a 15-foot basic wall, you know, at built stage. And that's all stays there, you know, for that reduction.
Yeah, so from a visibility standpoint, them looking at you would probably be less likely than you'll be able to see them, because you're gonna have that canopy of evergreens that's gonna be taller than a car window, starting off. So I think,
Those areas I thought were going to be 3 or 4 foot bushes spaced around. Is that correct on the slide?
Yeah.
Previous to this one?
Certainly, I'm happy to bring that up, yeah.
So, I don't, you know, maybe more trees would be less expensive.
So there's a
And I'm not
small.
trying to stop the project, but I really don't want to sit and look at somebody staring at me.
No, that's a fantastic question. Yeah, if you want to come up to the podium, just so we can keep it on record, if you want to kind of just chat about it. So there are a couple little areas here where you show these bushes.
Yes.
And is that something that you would like to have maybe on your lot? What are you, lot 20, I believe, right? Going back, I can probably pull it up on the,
Probably 20, yeah.
yeah, I think that,
I mean, what,
so that's you at the pool?
I'm not opposed to giving up some of the land to build the barrier, and I don't necessarily want the bushes. I really hate weed eating.
well, the bushes wouldn't be on
bushes
your
would be on
property.
their
They'd be on
property.
their own property.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll have the fence. Do you have a fence on your property currently?
I do. I have a
Okay.
6-foot fence, and I can see over it clearly.
Okay.
And people from the street can see me from about my waist up.
Okay, so what you'll have is, and I think the site's gonna get graded somewhat as well when they develop it, there's gonna be some grading on the site. If Mr. Metz wants to speak to that, so that may change some things on, with the visibility. But what the proposal would do is it would put a new vinyl fence 6 feet, pretty close to where your fence is. And then in addition to that, let me go back to the landscape plan here. You're going to have, it's spruces and I think evergreen. They're both evergreens. I'm not a landscape architect, but I know that they're both evergreens. And so you have a kind of a grouping, a cluster of plantings here
Can I go to the screen?
and here. Yeah, certainly.
She's wanting to get rid of those small bushes.
I'll try to
Yeah,
make it loud.
these are the small bushes right here.
Right, these small bushes, and I'm thinking cars are gonna be coming right here, they're gonna be sitting in line, they're gonna have a direct view of me to my pool and my porch and my dining room.
Well, go
And
to
they're
the,
not
go
gonna
to
be
the
doing
section
anything if
cut.
they're waiting in line.
Go to the section cut view.
Yep.
Like, yeah, that one. But I think what Mr. Roberta was saying, if they're in the car, you can see how low they are compared to the trees.
That's not accurate.
Well, I mean, there will be trees and berms.
Yes.
Yes, where the actual trees and the berms are, that would be
And the car will
over
be,
it.
if it's really graded the way you're saying, the car will be actually a little lower than the berm. If you're true that the property slope from your house to Springdale.
Well, how much difficulty would it be to just get rid of little bushes and add two
Yeah,
more
you could
trees?
just- So you can, why don't we just fill, yeah, I think that's acceptable. Is that something that you would like? So this right here is also like an ornamental tree, and those will stay, but for your property line, we could, just change those out and just, ask the applicant maybe if they're amenable to just planting that, that portion along Lot 20, as shown in the development plan, would be conditioned to, provide all evergreens at that 10 to 12-foot height on the berm, and then it would be there, and I think that would sufficiently build that kind of a wall there for you.
I would appreciate that.
Okay? That's fantastic, and I guess maybe we could,
I think it's a great solution. When we get to that point, we can make that as a
I was
condition.
going to ask a question, whether or not, I mean, we have one resident here. What about the other couple lots? Would it make sense to just continue that all the way across and protect all 4 of them?
I was thinking the same thing.
it could.
Yeah, just eliminate the bushes and make it all trees. That way it's high enough to screen.
Yeah.
I think it takes care of a lot of the concerns that maybe some of the other residents have. That's just my opinion.
No, I
Yeah,
agree. I
good
agree.
neighbor
Great suggestion.
gesture on the applicant's part.
Right.
Yeah.
I would think the cost would be probably neutral because you're going to take out 6 bushes or 1 tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I guess my only confusion is the,
Mr. Metz, if you could, just for the
Come to the
record,
podium,
if you
please.
could just come up to the podium.
Thank you, sir.
I guess my confusion is the reference to the, currently, you can see over a 6-foot fence. And that was I believe, the intent that the fence wasn't going to be the buffer.
Correct.
It's just an addition. The true buffer is the mound with the 12-foot trees on top. So
Yeah.
to make the statement, I can see across 6-foot fence, we took care of that by mounding and putting 12-foot trees on top of the mound.
Right, but you've created a couple gaps of shorter bushes is what she's referencing, and that's where we're just stressing that.
So I can point them out for anybody watching on TV, as well as all those in the audience here tonight for the board. So this is where there are a few windows
Yeah.
where there are bushes that are planted here along the rear property line. And I think the board and the resident with us here tonight is asking that the applicant would remove those and replace them with evergreen trees.
Well, trees.
It could be a new species or whatever, but something that will complement the evergreens that are there, be an evergreen, and then be planted at that 10 to 12-foot height that's indicated in the planting program that you have submitted.
Sure.
And so then, maybe to help him, what is the purpose of the privacy fence? The new one? Why do we need it?
Well, it's a requirement of the zoning resolution. Not everybody is always adjacent to, existing fences. And I don't know if there are all fences along that line.
I thought when you read the summary, it said a berm or a fence was in the zoning.
And
It
they-
does have, yes, you
Yeah,
can do
and
it.
they went beyond, and they did
I
both.
know, but now that it's a wall of trees, can he save money by not putting the privacy fence
I
in?
think the reason we did that was because and I remember this from the 2019, is that trees have their, there's a berm, but trees just aren't a wall.
Right.
There's that bottom part of the tree that kind of, when it flanges up, you could have that kind of going through.
Well,
And we like that fence because, just a plain vinyl fence, really, the bottom of the fence where the holes are, that little gap under the fence, the berm covers that, knocks out all the car lights. And then that fence also knocks down any of the, the gaps in the trees and, all that kind of stuff.
It's a sound reflection as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
When it's all said and done, there's gonna be a property fence 6 inches away from a new vinyl fence.
Yes.
Okay.
On that site,
Yes.
not all the other ones, on that specific site.
Yeah,
Well,
that-
yeah, I don't know if her neighbors have fences or
Yeah.
not, but,
They have chain link fences, one does, one has a privacy fence,
Yeah.
okay.
behind the pier is a
Yeah.
privacy fence.
And I had a split rail fence.
So just for clarification, so the privacy fence is only covering lot 20 and not going all the way?
Entire length.
Oh, it is,
Yeah, no, the proposed fence for the applicant goes
All
the
the way.
length of that rear property
Gotcha,
line.
okay.
The specific residents do actually have, as was stated, there's a mixture of fences located along there, ranging from chain link to privacy and just a mixture of fence types.
So this fence will just really be, don't they have a privacy fence currently behind Goodyear? This will-
They
this-
do,
this- So this will just continue on down the whole property line?
Correct.
Essentially.
I think it'll be different
So
materials. I think
aesthetically, it'll look similar and,
It will look similar. I think Goodyear did a wood fence, and I think this fence is going to be vinyl.
okay. All right, any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Shep, do you have any questions? Mr. Reininger?
No, sir.
Mr. Hill?
I do have one question. I'm curious about the uses. I know that tropical smoothie is probably not as busy as some of your other restaurant uses or even coffee shops. And I guess my question is, if, let's say, for instance, the tropical smoothie doesn't go there and you get a coffee shop, I think the coffee shops are a lot more busy than a tropical smoothie, which the stacking might be a concern. Can you kind of speak to that? Have you guys looked at whether or not you had maybe a Starbucks or something like that and what the stacking would look like for that?
This would never be a Starbucks location, and more than likely, it would never be a coffee location. Those restaurants tend to want to be on the morning side of traffic. This access and so forth does not provide that. That's why you always typically see the coffee operation, Starbucks, Dunkin', et cetera, on a going to work side, because they do 90% of their business in those morning hours, and they don't want traffic crossing, taking a left and then have to come back out, taking their left back into traffic. So, the site itself, whether it's tropical smoothie, Starbucks, Dunkin', has its own limitations that kind of filter itself out by the user. Typically, this would not be a coffee spot.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Anything else?
On that, just a comment, I thought where else you were going with your comment. In the verbiage and so forth, it was said, if this is not a tropical smoothie, then this wouldn't be allowed. As we all know, in today's world, businesses come and go, they close, they open, et cetera. They find a better location down the street in 5 years and so forth. I would hate to have this approved and build this with the idea that it's only for tropical smoothie. If 4 years from now they're not making it and the development is stuck with a spot they cannot use because it's not a tropical smoothie, that would be a concern. So,
That was actually one of my questions for you, because that is a staff recommendation.
pardon me.
That was going to be one of my questions for you, because that was a staff recommendation to the board, was that it be used only for the tropical smoothie cafe only, and then any changes to that would have to resubmit for a variance.
I mean, I guess the concern would be from a developer side is whether, this is a very expensive project. That land is very expensive. And whether that's approved for a tropical smoothie and tropical smoothie goes away and that space got to sit empty as a usable drive-through going forward. I guess that's a question more than a statement.
Maybe I can shed a little light on that. So the intent wasn't to be punitive. It's just that, there's a lot of different uses that could go here. It could, maybe not a coffee shop, but there's other uses that do have higher volume drive-throughs. And, due to the history on the site with the Freddy's, the stacking that could, is less than what's required, staff just felt that, that extra condition, just to require them to come back to the board. If it's another use that's similar to this, like a smoothie store, it makes sense. It comes in, it's a slam dunk application. But if it's something that, is a much higher intensity use, we felt that a by right, just change of use wasn't appropriate.
And I understand that. I guess, as I said, the drive-through window today, in today's world, is in many ways a pickup window more than a drive-through window. We got numbers of people calling in, ordering their dinners and meals with a pickup. And some of these restaurants are adapting to that by cutting down on their seating space and adding a pickup window as a feature. And I guess while I'm posing the question is that I would hope that the drive-through is the drive-through, and I understand the, we're not, the comment was made, it's not a McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, and nor would it be intended to be, nor do I think those type uses would ever find this an appropriate location and so forth. But so I just want to ask the question, how that, your thought on addressing the idea that it's a tropical smoothie only.
Well, I would vote for a flubs there, so we'd get that and take them out of Butler County.
I do have a question for staff, and I kind of see the applicant's point. Does the code differentiate between restaurant uses, or do you define tropical smoothie differently than you define a burger shop or anything like that?
Not at the time.
And
It's
that's hence
something that
why
we'd like to
that's
address
why
in
it's
the
written the way
rewrite.
it's written.
The code is that way. We're looking to update our zoning resolution. It was written, I mean, our parking requirements are probably 15, 20 years old.
Right.
It's been on my hit list since I've been here for a year and a half. We need to update it. But the code is what the code is today. So I think when the code was written, we didn't even have like fast casual or the type of uses that are happening now. So the code doesn't account for that. There is a provision in the resolution. I will bring this up. There is a provision in the resolution if there is a different type of use that's not specifically stated on the parking table, like a restaurant, which this fits that definition. It's on the table. It's pretty clear that, if they provide the calculations and it's not a use that's a restaurant, they can get a by right kind of administrative approval for that. If they come in and say, and that would go for, a future use here. So if they came in, it wasn't like a Mickey D's or a Taco Bell or something like that, they could come in and say, look, this isn't a restaurant use, this is a different use, and here's the calculations we have that'll work. I can do that by right. And we had looked at doing that at the beginning of this when they came back and said, a few months ago, hey, we're going to add this drive-through. And we looked at it every which way we could. But at the end of the day, the code defines them as a restaurant, even though it's a smoothie store, right? So, and that code is kind of written for, again, McDonald's, Burger King. So,
Right.
So that's one of the reasons that, the variance is here tonight for that.
Yeah, I think it, that was why I questioned whether or not there was the potential of it becoming a Starbucks. I'm familiar with a site that's not kind of off a major road, and they do stack up to the point to where it affects traffic on the regular roads around it, and their site is bigger than what you have. So that's why I asked the question. But at the end of the day, I think the primary people that would be affected are the tenants in here, and they would have a problem with the owner at that point.
Correct.
So, I don't really see too many issues with it. I mean, if we approve it for, if the board wants to approve that,
Well, yeah.
I'm not so certain that I would be comfortable with saying that it has to just be the smoothie, tropical smoothie. If it's a restaurant and it's considered a restaurant by code definition, I mean, I guess there is a chance that maybe a burger joint can go in there and cause a little bit more traffic on the site. Again, I think that it's going to affect more of the internal uses versus the street per se. I would just kind of defer that to the property owner to kind of manage that at that point. But I mean, that's just my vote, my 2 cents.
I had issues with it being only a specific designation too. So I mean, I'm with you on that part of it. It was too finite, and I felt that all we're doing is creating work for ourselves by having to go and revisit this every time a new tenant went into this space. And so I thought we could maybe rephrase this a little bit differently so it wasn't specifically to this.
Yeah, I agree. If it's a different use, say, for instance, if it goes from a restaurant to something else, I think that makes sense.
I think
Can we-
restaurant is the most intense use you're going to have there. So if you're going to do it, and honestly, it doesn't, you can remove the condition. If the board feels that's appropriate,
Right.
it's certainly within the purview of the board. And staff is more than happy to go along with that, no problem. So, again, and that restaurant use is the most intense use on there. So if that is good, I would say just remove the condition, and it's pretty
Can
straightforward.
we revise the recommendation to say any subsequent change of use requiring a higher stacking requirement in that tenant space? Just add the,
I think that, would that,
or do you
I
want to
mean,
just get rid of it?
is
altogether?
is it based on the actual square footage of the tenant space,
Just
or is
type of
it
use.
just the type of use? So at that point, once he gets the approval, theoretically, Freddie could go in there, if we approve it.
I would say that the approval could be locked down to the development plan. If you go in and redo the development plan, I don't think you would just approve that, and then, otherwise, people could come in with a plan that looks really good and just do a different plan.
Sure.
I would say that this approval's locked to this plan.
Right, what I'm saying,
And the
he
phrase
can,
would
he
fit
can,
that.
he can approve, or the property owner could approve any type of restaurant use to go into that specific space
Yes,
shown
if
there.
that condition was removed, then yes, I guess maybe they could,
Yeah.
with that specific space. And I guess maybe we could just tie it to that space.
Yeah.
Just so that, if you approve it for the drive-through, all of a sudden that whole building space doesn't just become an entire restaurant, right?
Right.
So maybe we just lock it to that, that tenant space.
Can we ask, I'd like to ask the applicant if, would you be okay with that? I mean, do you foresee any of the other tenant spaces utilizing drive-through, or is that drive-through specifically for that end cap?
Yes.
Okay,
And just a point I want to make, these centers tend to police themselves because landlords can't put uses in that are fighting to share the same space and the ability to get in and out of and so forth. And the type of concern that's being expressed here in terms of a high volume, I don't see this in their sight. They would never come here.
okay,
And they'd be wrapped all the way around the building.
right,
And obviously that landlord's not going to put his other tenants, a 5,000 square foot restaurant use in jeopardy for one space. So
right.
they tend to police themselves over time because the landlord's got to accommodate all his tenants. He can't just worry about that one space.
Okay.
Is there, I'm trying to figure out a way to do it to please both, staff and the applicant. Is there something that we could do that says maybe, at such time, if the use is getting out of control to where you're seeing stacking going up on the street, that it can be revisited? I mean, I don't know if that's feasible.
It's kind of different. I mean, that was just our concern, is
Yeah.
that, you change tenants, we don't know what's going in there, and who knows, but,
Has a traffic impact study been done on this site?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a traffic impact study that basically did the
Come back to the podium, please. Thank you. Get your steps in.
Traffic impact study was completed on this. It was the same engineer that did the Kroger's.
Okay. Perfect.
And so when you see those access points and so forth, that was already engineered by a traffic engineer.
Okay, perfect.
About, we changed it saying that this is right on what Mr. Bartle was saying, a change of the use in the tenant space requiring more drive-through stacking would require them to come back through to the township for zoning variance.
But based on what Mike said, it's just standard, just restaurant has a standard stacking requirement, so there's no,
But we're already short of that to begin with.
yeah, so you would just, anything that's greater in stacking requirements.
oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So if they were to modify their tenant spaces and say, okay, now we have this whole tenant, it's one building.
Tenant 2 and 3 becomes
Yeah,
something. maybe
becomes
we need to look
one,
at.
and now we have a restaurant that's this big, which would require a more stacking.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, I'm okay with that.
It's basically what you said. You can phrase it maybe better, but
Okay.
we'll let you phrase it.
During the meeting or after?
Yeah, I think,
On record.
For me, just observation, I think that, what the applicant is proposing is not outlandish. I like the design. I think that, under the pandemic, it makes sense what they're trying to do. They've definitely gone above and beyond to provide screening for those residents to the north. So, I like the plan. I think it's great.
I think it's attractive.
Yes.
Definitely has a good street view. Anybody else? Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve both variances, modifying condition number,
Section H, number 1.
yes, section H, number 1,
I didn't write it on there what I did though, but
to indicate that if the change in use increases the amount of stacking that is required, it would have to be re-reviewed by this body if the applicant wants to move forward with that.
did you catch that? You'll be on the.
Yeah, you're on the mic, so I'm getting as much as I can, but I'll get that, yes.
All right, so.
You got, did you get the landscape as well?
Oh, yes, and modifying the landscape to remove the shrubs and place trees all along that back, along the berm,
Okay.
evergreens.
Okay, so motion has been made. Anyone want a second?
So that motion does, I don't know if I heard you, did you say all 3 staff recommendations? Or-
Yes, modifying the two,
I mean-
the landscaping and
No, but the staff recommendations, one's being modified,
Yeah.
what you said, then your 2 and 3 would also be part of the motion. Correct?
2 and 3 being the buffer change, yes, that would be.
Yes.
Changing.
No, 2 is the proposed drive-through shall not be in operation later than 9 PM.
yes,
And 3 is that all landscaping be consistent, blah, blah.
Yeah,
You're-
those would still stay in place.
yes.
Yeah, I just didn't hear him say that he was acknowledging those other 2.
Yeah, so all staff recommendations modifying number 1, but then also requiring the shrubs to be removed and planted evergreen trees at the same height, 10 to 12 feet along that back berm.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so a motion has been made. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, discussion? I see none. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Reininger?
Aye.
Mr. Bordeaux?
Yes?
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Shup?
Aye.
Mr. Roberto?
Yes. So the variance with amendments have been approved. We're looking forward to you getting this built quickly so we can see a nice space in that spot. I
By the
have,
end of May.
I see nothing as far as unfinished business. We have approval of the minutes.
We don't have any minutes at this time.
Okay.
We'll have it at the next meeting.
And then the next meeting to be announced.
It will be to be announced. We don't have anything right now, but there is a development that's coming in, so
So do you think we'll have something next month?
we may.
Okay.
I'll update you all as soon as possible.
Any
I'll
amend-
know more by the end of this week, so
Any administrative matters?
not at this time.
Okay. Then we will be adjourned. We've got a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Seconded? Okay, roll call vote.
Roll call.
Roll call on that. Okay. Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Reininger?
Aye.
Mr. Shup?
Aye.
Mr. Bordeaux?
Yes.
Mr. Roberto?
Aye. Adjourned.